Day 567 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a quick look at those Russian losses again, as currently Russia sits on more than 270,000 military personnel losses, which is an addition of 590 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, really double digits all around for the main ones. So 16 tanks, 14 APVs, 30 artillery, and a daily logistics break-in 31 vehicles and fuel tanks. Then moving on, as there's lots to cover in this much shorter video today, so getting stuck into the Ukrainian map, as Ukrainian air defenses shot down 32 out of 44 Shahed drones launched from Russia overnight, and the bulk of which were directed at Odessa. And not just Odessa, but once again, on the very edge of the country in the Izmail and the Wherein districts that borders with Romania. As instead of going for key strategic military targets, Russia still continues to prioritize Ukrainian grain export infrastructure, such as ports and silos. But they seem to have to do this to save face after they left the grain deal about a month or two ago. And yet, Russia has vastly more pressing military concerns than this. It's a method of madness. Then we'll head across the Black Sea into Sevastopol with some massive breaking news, as there were multiple explosions reported overnight in the region. But it wasn't your average Ukrainian offensive strike into Crimean military targets, as even the Russian MOD stated that Ukraine fired 3 naval drones and 10 missiles at the major naval city hub in Russian-occupied Crimea. Now, specifically, one Rapucha-class landing ship and a diesel-powered Kilo-class submarine were imaged in the dry docks on the 12th, so just yesterday, and the dry docks of which are used for major repairs of Russian naval vessels. And it appears they may have both been hit, or at least as the daylight photos came, and we saw that the ship was completely destroyed, with early reports also stating a few smaller vessels as well as being damaged. And so the fact that this is a significant morale busting and deep strike on military targets in the heart of the Russian Navy simply cannot be understated. And I would certainly say that Ukraine at this point has time and time again exemplified patience, as they always seem to wait for just the right moment to inflict maximum damage. Now, all of this is still pretty fresh, but we look forward to getting a full accounting of exactly what was damaged and destroyed shortly. So as for where the map is concerned, just some brief updates today in Crimea and Odessa. So we'll move across to some news now. And starting off, a little bit of a Russian hardware update. I might just cheekily sneak this one in. So another Russian MTLB personnel carrier was sighted with naval cannons welded to it, which as you can see provided some very, very precise firing, but was also installed complete with shady cope cage. What will they think of next? Interestingly, these naval autocannons were already obsolete when first produced in 1951. For instance, a few years before that, the US had already introduced the rapid-fire dual-purpose guns with the proximity fuses and with radar-directed fire output. But Russia, or then the Soviet Union, kept producing them for the next 30-odd years. Then in some economy news, so an Airbus passenger aircraft in Russia had a technical malfunction with hydraulic problems due to a heavily suspected lack of maintenance and spare parts for the aircraft, which caused an emergency landing somewhere in the fields of Siberia. And this falls under economy news because it's just due to the economic sanctions placed on the country. And for a country that tends to vocalize not liking the West much, they tend to use a lot of Western products, big and small. And so the problem with getting Boeing or Airbus parts for a sanctioned country like Russia is that Western aircraft parts are produced serialized and designated for specific aircraft. It's not at all massively produced to the level of, say, a Samsung smartphone. And so there's no real third-party parts manufacturers that can take their place. But more problematically than that, Russia will likely continue to fly like this until an even more serious accident occurs. Now, all of the passengers were okay with this lucky and safe landing, but when something inevitably seems like it will go wrong, Russia may just choose to blame it on the criminal West. But no, just stop flying unmaintained or under-maintained planes instead. How about that? Now, Russia could always make a switch up to their Tupolev passenger aircraft, although those planes have a reputation of being extremely unreliable. Then in some more news, North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un met with Putin in Far East Russia today, all the way over at Vostochny. So the two leaders met for about 2 hours and discussed a range of issues, including the situation in Ukraine, economic cooperation, and North Korea's nuclear program. But really, the only thing on Putin's mind was artillery shells. Lots and lots of all those old, rusty, deteriorating, hazardous stockpiles of Soviet-era shells that North Korea will likely, in some part, give Russia. Which no doubt is a clear act of Russian desperation to find new and inventive ways to prolong the invasion of Ukraine. Of course, both parties may never explicitly admit to the supply of the munitions to Russia for its use in Ukraine. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Russia, as a member of the UN Security Council, agreed and signed to sanctions against arms trading with North Korea, which happened in about 2017 in response to North Korea's nuclear and missile tests. 2 peas in a pod. Look at those guys. Then in some more news, for the 4th day in a row, there was no diesel available at gas stations in Crimea's Sevastopol. Which is not surprising considering that diesel is the black gold of choice when it comes to running most ground and sea-based platforms in the military. But this issue is not just specific to Crimea, as there's lots of undeniable reports coming out of Russia right now in places such as Krasnodar, Tyumen, Omsk, Novosibirsk, Kemerovo, and Rostov, because in these such regions, the oil depots themselves are just empty of diesel, which is said to be in part due to logistical constraints, no surprises there, but also because it lacks profitability to sell the fuel locally within the country of Russia due to subsidies, as opposed to exporting whatever Russia has internationally. And so what happens when there is no equilibrium between supply and demand? You guessed it, prices have skyrocketed in Russia at the gas pump for diesel fuel and other fuels as well over the course of the past 12 months. So do me a favor and close your eyes for but a moment and imagine that you are a country with some of the biggest oil reserves in the world, and yet you are increasingly and dangerously facing the ridiculous irony of not having enough petroleum to go around. Unbelievable. Then moving across to a bit of a lighter segment, and I like this one. So Ukrainian soldiers just cooking a decent looking meal near to the front lines. All the meanwhile, another army nearby, not too far away, has to deal with expired MREs or rations. And in a lot of cases, it turns out that's actually one of the best case scenarios. And I'll show you a video tomorrow on that one too. Then moving across to a couple of quick funnies to round it all off with today, guys. So earlier today, just before Putin and Kim's meeting, associates of Mr. Kim inspected a chair just incessantly, just prior to the press conference between the two leaders. And being that North Korea's supreme leader has some, how shall I put this, structural integrity concerns as it pertains to his 280 pounds of mass, and yes, I looked that up. So you can just tell that these fearing, obedient subordinates of Kim didn't want him to have his chair break under his own weight in a large embarrassment of a moment for the dictator. It's like literally chair patrol. Then in a quick final funny to round it all off today, guys, so I did notice also during today's meeting event with Putin and Kim that on a side angle, Putin's overly administered Botox face was really showing off its shiny, puffy features today in the sunlight. And I'm telling you guys, this guy is really starting to chase his tail with the ongoing reapplication of the Botox serum. And I still don't know why more people aren't talking about this. It's as clear as day. As clear as a shiny, puffy day. Okay, so that has to be it for today, guys. It was not the video I wanted to create. Absolutely lacking in depth in so many ways of things I wanted to get into there. But I've got a lot of things extra to mention for you guys tomorrow, so I'll see you all again then. Thanks again for the support. Really do appreciate it. Please do continue to like and comment, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.